billions have been donated to the Solidarity Fund that was established to ease the lockdown burden, that is the financial burden. The fund's first job was to supply food relief to distressed households. But just how successful has this effort been? Nomkhita Ngweni, CEO of Solidarity Fund, joins us now. Good evening and thank you so much for your time on The Pulse tonight. Firstly, let's talk about the distribution of food parcels. There are numbers in the region of about 300,000 that are being thrown around that you've been able to assist. How accurate are those figures?
Well, firstly, thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Stephen, and to everybody for having us. As you know, the Solidarity Fund is a rapid response relief fund that was set up effectively to pull together the contributions of South Africans across all spheres. And you're right, one of the pillars of our work has been in the humanitarian effort, and we spent about a month actually trying to assist households who were affected by the lockdown, but especially as it related to food insecurity. We set out to support 250,000 households, and we actually have exceeded this to actually support 300,000 households. So the numbers are actually fully accurate.
At the beginning of this process, there were concerns that much of the food that was being given out was taking place in perhaps your hardest hit urban areas, and that it wasn't really reaching the rural areas where we know a lot of the impact also takes place, except most often it will be outside of the eye of the public.
So I think, Kathy, it's important to first note that the efforts of the Solidarity Fund are in the context of wider food relief programs that were actually being executed, whether it be from government or other sectors in business. And from a Solidarity Fund perspective, because we are focused on ensuring that the delivery and the impact of our efforts reaches South Africa in the whole, we pay quite careful attention and detail in ensuring that there was a wider distribution, both in terms of urban areas, but also seeking to reach the most rural of rural areas. And quite clearly, I mean, as much as we tried, I think we did manage to ensure that there were rural communities that were reached. But there were challenges in terms of, some of the distribution in that effect, especially as it related to very outlying areas. I remember in the Eastern Cape, there was a lot of rain at the time that we were planning our food distribution, and so trucks, couldn't get through. But on the whole, if you look at our map that is published actually on our website, which talks through the distribution areas, we actually did manage to reach as many areas as we could and also balance the rural and the urban.
Let's speak about some of the partners that you are working with when these distributions happen. We have seen scandals around food parcels and who they're given to. How are you ensuring that that is not the case with food parcels that are coming from the Solidarity Fund?
So from our perspective, the way that we operate at Kathy is that it's all about partnerships, because as a Solidarity Fund, we don't necessarily, we are a rapid response fund. We hopefully are not going to be here, for the long term, because we're hoping to be providing relief at this time in terms of this pandemic. And so partnerships are the hallmark of how we do our work. And our strategy was partnering firstly with the Department of Social Development, because there needed to be an identification of the most vulnerable families, and they actually have this data and information. We actually partnered also with 4 NGOs, and most importantly, we had provincial implementing agencies and also community-based organizations that we worked and contracted with to actually ensure that there was no leakage and that the food parcels were actually reaching the families directly.
There are big questions, of course, about what happens to the rest of the money, since not all of it is being spent on food that you're distributing through those food parcels. So many people have been waiting to see whether or not they're going to access some of the money for relief, especially small businesses in this country. Is that door going to be opened now?
So Kathy, I think it's quite important for us to outline that the Solidarity Fund operates in 3 areas, really. as a rapid response fund, we trying to augment, I suppose, the efforts of both government and the business sector in the health response as the outset. And I think that's where a lot of our resources have gone into. For example, in the procurement of PPE that is directed towards augmenting the efforts of the National Department of Health in particular. Humanitarian efforts, our work there has largely been around distribution of food, even though recently we've actually made an allocation towards supporting the escalation of gender-based violence and to support the National Command Center that deals with the gender-based violence and the related shelters. And then the third area of our work is around how we help us as South Africans to have more awareness in terms of a behavioral change, campaign that ultimately, hopefully, will help us in reducing and flattening the curve. So those are the three areas of our work. So I just do want to stress that the Solidarity Fund does not fund small businesses. So we focus on providing the immediate relief in those three areas that I have described.
Sure. Nomkhita, I have to let you go very briefly. How much money have you been able to get together so far?
So we've got pledges of 2.9 billion that have been converted into 2.6 billion when you talk about, what's landed. And so those are the funds that we received from South Africans thus far, 2.6 billion.